This video is brought to you by Film Convert in 1.43 to 1 ratio. To pull someone away from the comfort of their sofa to go to the movies is hard. From rising ticket prices, inconsistent viewing experiences, people talking loudly behind you at the emotional climax of the film, and the never-ending previews. Whopper, 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 Whopper. It's a harder and harder sell to get audiences to go to theaters. But if there's one bright spot emerging in the theater industry, it's the rise of premium theater experiences. From the rise of 4DX theaters and dine-in theaters, audiences are showing that they are willing to pay more for higher quality showings. But there is one theater experience that is essentially the holy grail, you could say, of modern viewing experience. And we're not talking about any old IMAX theater, but the ones that have the capability to show full-sized IMAX aspect ratio of 1.43 to 1 in 70mm film, and digital in some cases. But the amount of feature films created for this exclusive format are fewer in number than the amount of theaters capable of showing it. So in this video, we're going to take a look at every feature film ever shown in this extremely rare format and see just how rare it is to see IMAX in 1.43 to 1. Let's get into it.
IMAX, 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 IMAX.
Now, to answer the question, just how rare is this 1.43 to 1 theater experience? Well, there are 1,772 IMAX theaters in the world, with 770 of those theaters residing in China. Out of all of those theaters, now less than 100 are capable of showing in 1.43 to 1, with around 42 of those being dual laser theaters and around 30 theaters worldwide showing 15% 70mm IMAX film. Combined, that represents 4% of IMAX theaters worldwide and 1.6% for the 70mm showings. When you take a broader look at the entire theater industry of the reported 208,000 movie theaters in 2021, the 1.43 to 1 ratio screenings represent 0.01% of all theaters in the world. So now that we have a little bit of context for how truly rare 1.43 to 1 IMAX showings are, let's dig into the complicated world of what films actually were formatted for them.
Hey guys, Coco here. When you watch a movie in an IMAX theater, you know you're seeing it at its absolute best, just the way the filmmakers intended. But what if the movie wasn't shot with IMAX cameras? When that happens, how did they get it to look so good? The answer is DMR.
What is DMR? Well, in 2002, IMAX unveiled its DMR, or digital remastering process, where it would take 35mm film and digital 24p films, and they would blow it up to fit on IMAX 15% 70mm film. And well, this is sort of where the IMAX story begins its journey. These early DMR films were being sold as enhanced experiences, but in reality, they get a pretty dim, grainy image that only filled a portion of the large IMAX screen. So they never really seemed to get to that 1.43 to 1 ratio, but they would get pretty close, with a handful of films getting to 1.66 to 1 ratio. Apollo 13 was the first DMR film that was originally released in 1995, but they blew it up and had to cut 24 minutes of it due to the massive IMAX platter size. Other mentions were Treasure Planet and The Lion King, as well as the Beauty and the Beast re-release. Though this wasn't through a DMR process, and according to the reviews, showed a lot of issues in the animation of the film. Also, one to mention would be Fantasia 2000, which would release a 1.66 to 1 ratio. Also in 2000, the short film Cyberworld curiously released at IMAX theaters with a 1.44 to 1 aspect ratio. So an odd one that almost hit that 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio. Other films later on would do this DMR process as well, with The Hobbit, The Battle for the Five Armies receiving a 1570mm release, but as you can see from this clip, it was not a full 1.43 to 1 resolution, and reportedly there were some showings of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story on IMAX 1570mm prints, with a clip of Christopher Nolan's upcoming film Dunkirk showing on it as well. Of course, that was in 1.43 to 1. But not the Star Wars one. All of those honorable mentions come so close, but just didn't have those 1.43 to 1 releases. Talking about conversions over from film to digital though, we definitely live in a great time to be able to emulate some of these grain effects with our digital cameras. And that's where our sponsor Film Convert has some great tools that we use in every single video we put out with their awesome film emulation software. And they've even talked with us in the past about what it would take to emulate IMAX film.
If you were to get a very super sharp 8K image with an anamorphic lens and then scale it up to 16K and chuck on some 70mm grain, you'd probably end up with something that looks very close to digital IMAX in like perceived detail.
But just recently, they released a new plugin called Hazy, which allows you to further tweak that vintage filmic look. This plugin allows you to add a subtle glow to your footage and reduce the sharpness and contrasts. We recently used it in our video on Interstellar, where we built a massive spaceship cockpit for part of the video. Part of the stars were screen projection, but others were added in digitally. And to help blend both those practical and digital elements together, we utilized the Hazy plugin to make it look more consistent and sell the effect better. There are honestly so many different uses for this plugin that I'm excited to explore. But if you're looking to explore some fun effects, click on the link below to get 10% off of their Hazy Antillation standalone plugins they just released. And for Film Convert Nitrate and Cinematch, you can get 40% off on the Black Friday sale and 10% off extra using our code. So really, for any editors out there, I really recommend checking out Film Convert. Now let's get back to 1.43 to 1 ratio. All right, now we're almost to the whole list of the 1.43 to 1 ratio films, but I want to give some of these honorable mentions and explain some that have been shot with IMAX cameras or some other interesting things, but don't really make the list because of some technical reasons. Wonder Woman 1984 shot with an IMAX camera, but would only get a 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio release. For some reason, I'm not really sure. Star Trek Into Darkness would also shoot with an IMAX camera, but only expand it into 1.66 to 1. The Amazing Spider-Man reportedly had 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio shots and scenes, but it's unclear if it ever showed in that full format or if they ever finalized the movie in that 1.43 to 1 format before they just kind of canceled it. And for that one in particular, there's not that much information on it. Another film, Oblivion, might have had a 1.43 to 1 release, but the information around it is pretty sparse. There are some photos from Universal City Walk Theater that appear to be the size, but it's hard to confirm. IMDb and others only have a 1.90 to 1 release, which I will say that IMDb is not always the best source for information, but also there are some sources that cite it being available at very select theaters for a short time in this format. But in some forums like Blu-ray.com, they have a thread about this back in 2013 with one audience member, Eric the Duke, saying that it didn't fill the entire screen at the 1570 theater. 1570 theaters have an aspect ratio of 1.43 to 1, and this movie is just 1.89 in IMAX. So all this to conclude, while some will list Oblivion as a movie that showed in 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio, there's just not enough evidence of this being true. The next film, Lucy, was filmed with an IMAX camera, but quietly released at a 2.35 to 1 ratio. And there are photos from the set of them using IMAX film cameras to capture specific scenes. And there was a lot of advertising at first around IMAX in this film, but something must have gone wrong in the production process for them to not release it in IMAX. The next film is The Tree of Life by director Terrence Malick. Somewhere in it used an IMAX camera, among a ton of other cameras, but never received a 1.43 to 1 release. It's honestly a fascinating production, that film. And last, we have both Star Wars: The Last Jedi and Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker, which never received 1.43 to 1 releases. Despite The Last Jedi maybe using an IMAX camera, Rise of Skywalker reportedly also may have had the prologue in 1.43 to 1 ratio, but for now I'm leaving it off the main list as just the prologue seems kind of a strange one to include in the 1.43 to 1. Now we're finally getting to some of the 1.43 to 1 releases. Now these are the cropped releases. In the early 2000s, there were a bunch of 1.43 to 1 releases that were basically cropped to fit the format. Those include The Ant Bully, Happy Feet, Kung Fu Panda in 2008, and Madagascar: Escape to Africa. So mostly animation, but worthy of mentioning here. All right, now we finally got into the section of the video you've all been waiting for. The 1.43 to 1 releases. First up, we have The Dark Knight in 2008, Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, The Hunger Games: Catching Fire in 2013, Interstellar in 2014, Star Wars: The Force Awakens 2015, which made a big deal about using IMAX cameras for select scenes in the film, and we finally were able to find a page on IMAX's website that actually show the listing of 1570mm showings in 14 theaters. Next up, we have Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice in 2016, Dunkirk in 2017, First Man in 2018, The Lion King in 2019, Tenet in 2020, Dune in 2021 in digital only, No Time to Die in 2021, The Eternals in 2021, 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio for IMAX GT laser venues only, and that would use only about 6 minutes of the 1.43 to 1 ratio and would be, of course, at laser venues only. Lightyear in 2022, Nope in 2022 as well. Oppenheimer in 2023. Dune Part 2 in 2024. Unlike the first Dune films, this would receive a 12 theater release in 70mm film. Next up would be Megalopolis, this year in 2024. Reportedly used a couple of scenes in 1.43:1 ratio, only playing if the theater had the GT laser, of course. And last would be Joker 2024, which was released to select theaters in 70mm IMAX, and something tells me it will likely never show in 70mm again. Now, to leave you with a bit of hope for the future, here are the future releases that are coming this year and next year. Of course, in December, as I'm sure a lot of you know, Interstellar, for its 10th anniversary, is re-releasing to IMAX, but there are really only a handful of theaters that are actually showing it in 70mm IMAX, and I've linked that below. Next year, Sinners, filmed with IMAX film cameras. This film has some evidence. Of course, filming with IMAX film cameras, you would hope they would do it, but there's a lot of evidence showing that it will be released with both digital and film 1.43:1. And lastly, we have an untitled Christopher Nolan film in 2026. As I'm sure you've heard at this point, Christopher Nolan has a new film he is working on with a ridiculous amount of A-list actors that keep getting announced to be part of it. Beyond that, he's reportedly utilizing IMAX's next generation of film cameras. So that will be a fascinating film to monitor and see what the next evolution of IMAX film cameras can accomplish. Now, if you're interested in seeing one of the incredible productions of a 1.43:1 film, take a look at our awesome video of the production of Interstellar.